Todd let me in through the back door into a kitchen. He eased the door shut behind us without a sound. Curtains were pulled over the windows, and the room had a dark, gloomy feel and a stale, chilly smell. I usually love the way kitchens smell, but not this one. Todd whispered, "Come on, Bailey." And I followed him out of the kitchen and down the hallway. About halfway along it, we passed a doorway to a living room, where a woman was slumped on a couch watching television. She didn't move or even turn her head as we went past. But someone else moved. After we were past the door, Todd turned back. I paused, too. He scowled as a small figure came to the doorway that led into the living room, outlined against the grayish flickering light of the TV. It was Linda, Todd's sister. She saw me and her eyes grew wider. She came forward. "No," Todd hissed at her. Well, I certainly knew that word. I cringed at the sharp tone of Todd's voice. Linda put a finger in her mouth, chewing at the nail, but she didn't back up. She held her other hand out to me. I licked it. Todd stepped forward to push Linda away. "Leave me alone," he said sharply to her. Then he opened the door, grabbed my collar, and pulled me inside. He didn't have to do that. I would have gone with him, even though I would rather have stayed with Linda. I knew what I was supposed to do to be a good dog. Todd shut the door, and I heard the lock make a clicking sound. I sniffed at piles of smelly clothes on the floor and found a plate under an old t-shirt with half a piece of toast on it. I quickly ate it. Clean the plate was always my job when a plate was on the floor. Then I checked on what Todd was doing. He was walking quickly around the room, his hands shoved into his pocket. "Okay," he said. "Okay, now. He sat at his desk and opened a drawer. I smelled firecrackers in there. The odor stung my nose. I didn't like it. I backed up to the other side of the room, under a window. "I don't know where Bailey is," Todd muttered. "I haven't seen Bailey." I wagged at my name, then sighed and flopped onto a pile of sweatshirts. It had been a long day, and I was tired. I hoped I'd be going home to the boys soon. A tiny knock at the door made Todd jump up as though one of his firecrackers had gone off right under him. I jumped up too and came over to stand right behind Todd as he whispered angrily out his door at Linda. I could smell the girl more than I could see her in the dark hallway. Her dress needed washing, and she had been eating salty crackers, and she was both worried and scared. And that made me worried too. I backed away from Todd and started to pace. I didn't feel like lying back down. Todd slammed the door and locked it again. I could feel a flash of pure rage from him, and it frightened me. I'd felt the boy get angry from time to time, Dad and Mom too, but that was a mild feeling compared to what I could sense from Todd. Just then there was a drawn-out cry from outside the window. "Bailey! Ethan, my boy was calling me." I ran to the window and tried to jump up, putting both feet on the sill. But before I could see anything except that it was starting to get dark out there, Todd was beside me. He yanked a thick curtain that smelled of dust across the glass. I couldn't see the boy. I barked in frustration. Todd smacked at my rear end with an open palm. "No, bad dog, no barking." I whined and backed away, as alarmed by the flare of rage in the tone of his voice as I was by the pain from my hindquarters. Had I been a bad dog? But I'd been trying to get to my boy. When he called, I was supposed to come. "Todd?" a woman shouted from somewhere in the house. Todd glared at me. "You stay here. You stay," he ordered. He backed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. I paced around the room some more, confused. I knew the word stay. I knew what it meant, but I didn't like it much, and the boy was calling me. How could I find him? It wasn't right being here in this room. I was becoming more and more sure about that. But the door was shut and the window was covered, and Todd had certainly seemed angry when I barked. A click came from the door and I whirled around. The door was eased open just a little, and in the narrow crack along its frame I could see Linda's face. She thrust a hand into the room. It was holding a soggy cracker. "Here, Bailey," she whispered. "Good dog." I liked her voice. I liked her words. And most of all, I liked that cracker. I was at the door in 3 steps, and I slurped that cracker out of her sweaty hand. Linda opened the door wider and beckoned to me. I bounded down the hallway after her until we reached the kitchen. Todd's voice came from the living room. "What? What do you want?" "No way, I'm not doing that," a woman's voice mumbled. "I don't care, I'm busy," Todd snapped. Linda and I reached the door to the outside. She pushed it open and the cool night air flowed in. I sniffed it gratefully and leaped onto the grass. Then I turned to look back for a moment. Linda stood in the doorway, looking both relieved and miserable. For a moment I wished I could bring her with me. She seemed nice, and maybe she'd bring some crackers along with her. Then I raced off into the night to find my boy. Mom's car was down the street, and the boy was leaning out of a window calling, "Bailey!" I took off after it as fast as I could. The taillights flashed brightly, and a moment later, Ethan was out on the street, running to me. "Oh, Bailey, where have you been?" he said, burying his face in my fur. "You're a bad, bad dog." I knew that being a bad dog was wrong, but the love pouring off of the boy was so strong. I couldn't help feeling that, right now, being a bad dog was somehow good. I was so glad to be back home that I didn't even check the gate to the backyard for a few days. When I did feel adventurous again and managed to slip out, I stayed away from Todd's end of the street. And if I ever saw or smelled him playing in the creek, I was careful to slink into shadows or dash behind some bushes before he could see me. I was learning new words every day. Besides being a good dog and sometimes a bad dog, I was told that I was a big dog over and over. It seemed to be a good thing mostly, so I wagged when I heard it. I also noticed that I had trouble arranging myself comfortably on the boy's bed. Then there was the word snow. The first time I heard it, I thought Ethan was shouting, "No!" And I didn't understand. I didn't even have anything in my mouth, and I certainly hadn't lifted my leg. I'd already decided doing that inside the house was more trouble than it was worth. But Ethan threw on his coat and hat and boots and dashed outside, yelling at me to follow. That's when I discovered that snow meant the world outside had changed. It was covered all over in a cold, white, furry coat. I paused at the back door and stared. Where had the grass gone? Where was the patio? I put a paw tentatively into the white fuzz. Cold! But Ethan was running around in it, and I wanted to be near him. So, very bravely, I jumped into the freezing stuff with all 4 feet. "Come on, Bailey," Ethan shouted. "It's snow!" The snow made my paws ache after a while, but it was fun to bite, and Ethan loved it so much that I decided I loved it too. He pulled a heavy, flat wooden thing out of the garage. "Let's go sledding, Bailey," he said. I followed him, tromping through the snow and up to a hill a few blocks from our house. He dropped the flat wooden thing to the ground and flopped down on top of it. "It's a sled, okay, Bailey? You watch, Bailey. It's fun." He pushed hard with his hands, and suddenly he shot down the hill away from me. I stared at astonishment. I never knew that the boy could move like that. Instead of walking or running, stiffly upright on two legs. He was zooming close to the ground. I tore down the hill after him, barking with excitement and surprise. The sled slowed a bit as it got closer to the bottom of the hill, and that meant I could catch up. I timed things carefully and leaped, landing right on top of Ethan. He shouted. The sled shot ahead, skimming past the sleds of several other children who had all been doing the same thing. The ground flattened out, and the sled skidded sideways, tumbling Ethan and me off into a thick patch of snow. You like sledding, Ethan gasped, laughing under me. You're a sled dog, Bailey. I barked, and we raced up the hill to do it again. We went sledding a lot while the snow stayed on the ground. After a while, it went away, and I learned the word spring, which meant the sun stayed out longer and the air warmed up, and Mom spent weekends digging in the backyard and planting flowers. The dirt smelled so wonderful, rich and dark and full of life, that after everybody went away, I dug too, pulling the flowers back up from their beds. I hoped Mom appreciated my help. That night they all called me a bad dog again, and I even had to spend the evening out in the garage instead of lying on Ethan's feet while he worked on his papers. I didn't understand it at all. I'd just done what Mom had been doing. What was wrong with that? Then one day the kids on the yellow school bus were so loud that I could hear them shrieking 5 minutes before the thing stopped in front of the house. The boy was full of joy as he ran up to me, so excited that I ran around and around in circles, barking as loud as I could. When Mom came home, she was happy too, and from then on, Ethan didn't go to school anymore. We got to lie in bed quietly every morning instead of getting up for breakfast with Dad. Life had finally gotten back to normal. Thank goodness that whole school thing was over and done with. And then we're ready to pick up on Chapter 8, page 74.